The rain hammered against the cracked pavement as Maya Carter stumbled out of the diner, her apron still stained with grease and coffee. Her hands trembled, not from the cold November wind cutting through her thin jacket, but from the eviction notice crumpled in her pocket. 72 hours. That's all she had left before she and her grandmother would be on the streets. She pressed her back against the brick wall of the alley, tears mixing with rain on her dark brown skin. Her natural curls were plastered to her face as she tilted her head toward the grey sky. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so tired. I don't know what else to do. Please, just help me." She didn't see the black Mercedes idling at the alley's entrance, didn't notice the man in the back seat who had lowered his window just enough to hear her desperate prayer. Han Kang-dae watched her with dark, intense eyes, his jaw tightening as something unfamiliar stirred in his chest, something he hadn't felt in the 15 years since he'd taken over his father's organization. "Sir?" his driver questioned. "Wait," Kang-dae commanded, his gaze never leaving the woman who had just unknowingly changed the trajectory of his carefully controlled life. Maya Carter had learned long ago that life didn't care about fairness. At 26, she'd already buried both parents, dropped out of college to care for her grandmother, and worked 3 jobs just to keep their heads barely above water. The Southside apartment she shared with her grandmother wasn't much, peeling wallpaper, pipes that groaned, and neighbors who minded their own business, but it was home. "Table 4 wants a refill," her manager barked, his breath reeking of cigarettes and cheap whiskey. Maya grabbed the coffee pot with practiced efficiency, painting on the smile that had become her armor. The diner was a relic from the 1960s, all cracked vinyl booths and flickering fluorescent lights. The breakfast crowd had thinned, leaving only the regulars who nursed their coffee for hours and tipped in loose change. Her feet ached in her worn sneakers. She'd been on them for 6 hours straight, and she still had another shift at the convenience store tonight. But pain was just another thing you learned to ignore when survival was your only option. "Here you go, Mr. Patterson," she said warmly to the elderly man at table 4, refilling his cup with steady hands despite her exhaustion. "You're a good girl, Maya," he said, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "Your grandmother raised you right." The mention of her grandmother made Maya's chest tighten. The medical bills from last month's hospital stay sat in a drawer at home, each one a reminder of how quickly everything could fall apart. The eviction notice in her pocket felt like it was burning through the fabric. The bell above the door chimed, and Maya glanced up out of habit. Her breath caught. 3 men entered, and the entire atmosphere of the diner shifted. They moved with the kind of confidence that came from never having to question their place in any room. But it was the man in the center who commanded attention without saying a word. He was tall and imposing, his black hair styled perfectly despite the rain outside. His tailored suit probably cost more than Maya made in 6 months. But it was his eyes that held her frozen. Dark, calculating, and intense enough to make her pulse quicken, with something between wariness and fascination. Han Kang-dae surveyed the diner with the assessing gaze of a man who constantly evaluated threats and opportunities. His reputation in Chicago's underground was legendary, ruthless, brilliant, and absolutely untouchable. At 35, he controlled more territory than men twice his age, and he'd done it through a combination of strategic brilliance and calculated violence. He'd built his empire on the bones of those who'd underestimated him. His gaze swept past the stained booths and outdated decor until it landed on her. Recognition flickered in his eyes, the woman from the alley last night, the one whose prayer had haunted him through a sleepless night of meetings and blood. Maya's manager rushed forward, his demeanor transforming from surly boss to obsequious servant. "Gentlemen, please, our best booth." "Her section," Kang-dae interrupted, his voice deep and commanding as he nodded toward Maya. His English was flawless, barely touched by an accent that only emerged on certain syllables. Maya's heart hammered as the 3 men made their way to her section. She'd waited on wealthy customers before, but there was something different about these men, something dangerous that made her instincts scream to stay alert. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "What can I get you?" Kang-dae's 2 associates, clearly bodyguards, ordered quickly, but he simply studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. "Coffee," he finally said. "Black. Right away." As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "You work hard." It wasn't a question. Maya turned back slowly, meeting those dark eyes. "We all do what we have to do." Something flickered across his face. Approval, maybe, or interest. Yes, some more than others. The rest of their meal passed in relative silence. But Maya felt his gaze on her throughout her shift. When she finally brought their check, she found a business card tucked beneath a $100 bill, 10 times what the meal had cost. The card was simple, Han Kangdae, followed by a phone number. "You need help," he said quietly, as she stared at the card. "Call me." "I don't." "The eviction notice in your pocket, the medical bills, your grandmother's medication costs." He leaned back, his expression unreadable. "I know everything, Maya Carter. The question is whether your pride is worth more than her life." Maya's blood ran cold. "How do you—" "Call me," he repeated, standing in one fluid motion. His bodyguards flanked him instantly. "Before it's too late." They left without another word, leaving Maya standing with shaking hands and a business card that felt like a deal with the devil himself. That night, as she sat in her grandmother's room listening to the labored breathing of the woman who'd raised her, Maya stared at that card. Her grandmother's medication was running out. The eviction was 3 days away. Her pride had never put food on the table or paid the rent. With trembling fingers, she dialed the number. He answered on the first ring. "I've been waiting." The address Kangdae gave her was in a part of Chicago Maya had only seen from bus windows, the kind of neighborhood where doormen wore suits nicer than anything in her closet, and the buildings had names instead of numbers. The Sinclair Tower rose 40 stories above the Chicago River, all glass and steel reflecting the afternoon sun. Maya stood on the sidewalk, her second-hand coat suddenly feeling even more threadbare. She'd told her grandmother she was picking up an extra shift. The lie tasted bitter, but the truth that she was meeting a man who terrified and intrigued her in equal measure would only cause worry. "Miss Carter," a man in a pristine suit approached. "Mr. Han is expecting you. Please follow me." The lobby was all marble and modern art, the kind of place where her footsteps echoed too loudly. They rode the elevator in silence to the penthouse level. The doors opened directly into an apartment that took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. The furniture was minimalist but clearly expensive, all clean lines and quality craftsmanship. Everything was immaculate, controlled, much like the man himself. Kangdae stood at the windows, his back to her, hands clasped behind him. He wore a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing surprisingly muscular forearms. For a moment she could almost forget he was dangerous. "Thank you for coming," he said without turning around. "You didn't really give me a choice." Maya's voice came out stronger than she felt. "You threatened my grandmother. I stated facts." Now he turned, and the afternoon light caught the sharp planes of his face. There was a small scar at his temple, barely visible, a reminder that his power hadn't come without cost. "Your situation is desperate. I'm offering a solution. Nothing is free. What do you want?" A slight smile curved his lips, the first real expression she'd seen from him. "Smart. I like that." He moved toward her with the controlled grace of a predator. "I need someone trustworthy in my home, someone to manage household affairs, coordinate staff, handle certain domestic arrangements. You want a housekeeper? I want someone I can trust, someone who has too much to lose to betray me." He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle. "You need money, security. I can provide both." "Why me?" The question hung between them. Kangdae's expression shifted, something almost vulnerable flickering across his features before his mask returned. "Because when you prayed in that alley, you didn't ask for wealth or revenge or anything selfish. You asked for strength to keep going, for your grandmother to be comfortable, for a chance." His dark eyes held hers. "That kind of heart is rare in my world, Maya Carter. I've learned to recognize value when I see it." Maya's throat tightened. "I don't know anything about your world." "Good. It means you haven't been corrupted by it yet." He moved to his desk, retrieving a folder. "This is my offer. You move into the guest suite here. Your grandmother receives the best medical care available. I have doctors on retainer. All her medications, all her needs covered. You receive a salary of $10,000 monthly. Your only job is to manage this household and be available when I need you." $10,000. That was more than she made in 3 months, working herself to exhaustion. "What's the catch? You live here, you're available when I need you, and you tell no one about my business." His gaze intensified. "What you see, what you hear in this apartment stays between us. Can you do that?" Maya's mind raced. It sounded too good to be true, and in her experience things that sounded too good to be true usually were, but her grandmother's face flashed through her mind, the way she struggled to breathe some nights, the pain she tried to hide. "How do I know you won't—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but the fear was clear. Kangdi's expression softened almost imperceptibly. I don't hurt innocent people, Maya. Despite what you may have heard about me, I have a code. You and your grandmother are under my protection now. That means something. And if I want to leave, then you leave. I'm not a kidnapper. He set the folder on the table between them. But I think you'll find this arrangement benefits us both. Read the contract. Take it to a lawyer if you want. I'll cover the cost. Maya picked up the folder with shaking hands. Everything he'd said was outlined in precise legal language. It seemed legitimate, suspiciously so. I need to think about it. Of course. You have until midnight tonight. After that, the offer expires. He turned back to the windows, dismissing her. My driver will take you home. As Maya rode the elevator down, her mind spun with possibilities and dangers. She didn't trust him, couldn't trust him, but she also couldn't deny that he was offering her the one thing she'd prayed for, a way to save her grandmother. That evening, as she fed her grandmother soup and listened to her stories about the old days, Maya made her decision. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. Whatever Han Kangdae's real motives, she would take this chance. She called him at 11:45 p.m. I accept. There was a pause, then his voice warm with something that might have been approval. Good. My people will help you move tomorrow. Your grandmother will be transferred to a private facility where she'll receive round-the-clock care. Wait, I thought. She'll be more comfortable there and you can visit whenever you want. Trust me, Maya. I'm granting your prayer, remember? The line went dead before she could respond, leaving her staring at her phone and wondering if she'd just made a deal with the devil, or if maybe, just maybe, the devil wasn't quite what she'd expected. Moving into Kangdae's penthouse felt surreal. Maya's entire life fit into 3 suitcases. A humbling realization when faced with his wealth. The guest suite he'd given her was larger than the apartment she'd shared with her grandmother, complete with a king-sized bed, ensuite bathroom with a soaking tub, and a closet that echoed when she opened it. Mr. Han has arranged for appropriate clothing, the housekeeper Mrs. Chen informed her in accented English. The older Korean woman had kind eyes, but a no-nonsense demeanor. Designer sent measurements. Arrive tomorrow. That's not necessary. Mr. Han insists. You represent his household now. Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. He is particular about image, but he is also fair. You work hard. He takes care of you. This is his way. Maya spent the first week learning the rhythms of Kangdae's life. He left early, often before dawn, and returned late, usually after she'd gone to bed. She saw him in passing, a glimpse of him in tailored suits heading out, the sound of his voice speaking rapid Korean on phone calls, the subtle signs that he'd been home, a coffee cup in the sink, documents on his desk. The household staff consisted of Mrs. Chen, 2 rotating bodyguards, and a driver. They treated Maya with cautious respect, clearly unsure of her position in Kangdae's life. She couldn't blame them. She wasn't sure herself. Her days were surprisingly manageable. She coordinated with Mrs. Chen on household management, organized Kangdae's schedule, handled his personal correspondence. It was almost normal, if you ignored the security cameras and the bodyguards and the occasional conversations in Korean that stopped when she entered a room. Visiting her grandmother became the highlight of Maya's week. The private facility was beautiful, more like a luxury hotel than a care facility. Her grandmother had her own suite with a view, round-the-clock nursing care, and the kind of treatment that would have bankrupted them in a week at a regular hospital. This man who's helping you, her grandmother said during one visit, her breathing easier now that she had proper medication. Is he good to you? Maya thought about the question carefully. He's complicated. Powerful men usually are. Her grandmother's knowing eyes studied her face. But is he kind, baby girl? That's what matters. Kind wasn't the word Maya would have chosen for Han Kangdae. Controlled, dangerous, magnetic, but kind. Then she remembered how he'd personally ensured her grandmother's transfer, how he'd called the facility director himself to confirm everything was arranged, how he'd left a note on Maya's pillow that first night. Your grandmother is comfortable. Sleep well. Yes, Maya said finally. In his own way, I think he is. Everything changed the night of the business dinner. You'll accompany me tonight, Kangdae informed her that morning, the first real conversation they'd had in 2 weeks. He stood in the kitchen drinking coffee, looking unfairly attractive in a charcoal suit. I need someone I trust present. I don't understand, I'm not... These are important business associates. Having a woman present makes it seem less formal. less threatening. His dark eyes met hers. "Can you handle that?" Maya wanted to refuse, wanted to remind him that playing arm candy wasn't in her job description, but something in his expression stopped her, a tension around his eyes, a tightness in his jaw. "What should I wear?" Relief flickered across his face. "The blue dress. Third door in your closet." The dress in question was stunning, a deep sapphire that complemented her dark skin beautifully, with a modest neckline, but a back that dipped just low enough to be sophisticated. When she emerged that evening, Kang Dae's gaze tracked over her with an intensity that made her pulse race. "Perfect," he murmured. Then, surprising her, he stepped closer and fastened a delicate necklace around her throat. His fingers brushed her skin, and she shivered at the contact. "This was my mother's. It stays with the family, but you can wear it tonight." "Kang Dae, I can't." "It's just jewelry, Maya, and it completes the look." But his voice was rougher than usual, and his hands lingered a moment longer than necessary. The dinner was at an exclusive restaurant, the kind with no prices on the menu, and a waiting list measured in months. Their party consisted of Kang Dae, Maya, and 3 other men who watched her with calculated interest. The conversation flowed in a mixture of English and Korean, much of it going over Maya's head. She smiled politely, played her part, and tried to ignore the way one of the men, Mr. Park, a real estate developer, kept staring at her. "Your companion is lovely," Park said to Kang Dae in English, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Where did you find such an exotic beauty?" Maya's spine stiffened at the word exotic, but Kang Dae's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. A warning or comfort, she wasn't sure which. "Maya is invaluable to me," Kang Dae said smoothly, his thumb stroking across her knuckles in a gesture that felt far too intimate. "I'm very fortunate." Something in his tone made the other men exchange glances. The conversation shifted, became more careful, more respectful. Maya realized with a start that they thought she was Kang Dae's girlfriend. Maybe more. She should have corrected them, should have pulled her hand away. She didn't. The evening ended without incident, but as they rode back in the Mercedes, Kang Dae was silent, his jaw tight with tension. "What's wrong?" Maya finally asked. "Park is going to be a problem. He wants territory I control, and tonight proved he's willing to disrespect me to get it." His hands flexed into fists. "Commenting on you like that was a message. I'm sorry if I—" "You were perfect," Kang Dae interrupted, his gaze intense in the dim light of the car. "You handled yourself with grace. Most people would have faltered. I've dealt with worse than rude comments. You shouldn't have to." There was an edge to his voice, something almost protective. "Not anymore." Back at the penthouse, Maya started to return the necklace, but Kang Dae stopped her, his hand covering hers. "Keep it," he said quietly. "It suits you better than it ever did in a vault." "Kang Dae, this is too much. My mother wore it when she needed courage, when she needed to remember her strength." His thumb brushed over her palm, sending electricity up her arm. "You remind me of her sometimes. That same quiet fire." Maya's breath caught. They stood too close, the air between them charged with something neither acknowledged. She could see the faint scar at his temple, the tiny lines at the corners of his eyes, could smell his cologne and something underneath, something distinctly him. "I should go to bed," she whispered but didn't move. "Yes," he agreed, but his hand still held hers. "Maya." "Yes? Thank you. For tonight. For being here." The vulnerability in his voice was startling, a crack in his armor that let her see the man beneath the mafia boss. She squeezed his hand once, then pulled away before she could do something foolish, like wonder what it would feel like if he pulled her closer, like imagine what his lips would taste like. As she lay in bed that night, the necklace still warm against her skin, Maya admitted what she'd been denying for weeks. She was falling for Han Kang Dae. And that was the most dangerous thing she could possibly do. The attack came on a Thursday night. Maya was in the kitchen making tea when she heard the commotion. Raised voices, the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. Her heart lurched as she recognized Kang Dae's voice, sharp with command in Korean. She should have stayed where she was, should have locked herself in her room like Mrs. Chen was frantically whispering for her to do. Instead, she crept toward the living room, her pulse thundering in her ears. 3 men had somehow gotten past security. One of Kang Dae's bodyguards lay unconscious, or worse, near the door. The other was locked in combat with an intruder, and Kang Dae himself faced off against a man she recognized from the restaurant, Park. "You've become soft, Han," Park sneered in English, clearly wanting Maya to understand. All because of that black whore you've taken in. Did you really think I wouldn't find out she's just your glorified maid? The rage that flooded Maya was visceral, not at Park's words about her, but at the look of cold murder that crossed Kangdae's face. Her name is Maya, Kangdae said with deadly calm, and she's worth 1,000 of you. Everything happened too fast. Park lunged. Kangdae moved with brutal efficiency, disarming him in seconds. But Park's associate had gotten past the bodyguard and was raising a gun, pointing it directly at Kangdae's back. Maya didn't think. She grabbed the heavy marble fruit bowl from the kitchen counter and threw it with all her strength. It hit the gunman's shoulder, not enough to stop him, but enough to ruin his aim. The shot went wide, shattering a window. Kangdae spun, saw the danger, and moved with lethal grace. Within seconds, it was over. Park and his men were subdued, more security flooding into the penthouse. But Maya stood frozen, the reality of what had just happened crashing over her. "Get them out," Kangdae ordered in Korean, then switched to English. "And find out how they got past security. Someone is going to answer for this." His voice was ice, but when he turned to Maya, his eyes blazed with something else entirely. "Are you hurt?" His hands framed her face, tilting it so he could search for injuries. "No, I'm fine. You could have been killed." His voice cracked slightly. "Maya, do you understand what you just did? You put yourself in danger for me. You were going to be shot. I've been shot before. I would survive. But you—" He pulled her against him suddenly, his arms wrapping around her like he could shield her from the world. "You shouldn't be here. This life, this danger, it's not what you signed up for." Maya felt his heart hammering against her cheek, felt the tremor in his hands as they pressed against her back. This wasn't the controlled mafia boss. This was a man terrified of losing something precious. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered into his chest. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes searching hers. "Why? Why would you risk yourself for me?" The answer was simple and terrifying. "Because I care about you, Kangdae, more than I should, more than is smart or safe." Something broke in his expression, all that careful control shattering. "Maya, I know this is complicated. I know I'm just the woman you hired to manage your house, but I can't help how I feel." He kissed her. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was desperate and consuming, like a man who'd been holding back for too long. His hands tangled in her hair, tilting her head so he could deepen the kiss. Maya melted into him, her fingers gripping his shirt as the world fell away. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Kangdae pressed his forehead to hers. "You're not just some woman I hired," he said roughly. "You haven't been for a long time. You're the first real thing in my life in years. The first person who looks at me and sees more than power or danger or opportunity. What do I see? A man who wants to be worthy of you." His thumb traced her bottom lip. "A man who's falling in love with you and has no idea how to protect you from his world." Maya's heart soared even as fear gripped her. "I don't need protection from you. I need you to trust me, to let me choose to be here. Even knowing what I am, what I do. I see who you are when you check on my grandmother, when you remember Mrs. Chen's birthday, when you think no one is watching." She cupped his face, feeling the tension in his jaw. "You're not just the mafia boss, Kangdae. You're also the man who heard my prayer." He kissed her again, softer this time, but no less intense. When he pulled back, his expression was troubled. "There's something you need to know about tonight, about Park." He took her hand, leading her to sit on the couch. "He came here to hurt you, Maya, to send me a message by taking away something I care about. That's how this world works. The people you love become your greatest weakness. So what do? I end this. Tomorrow I'm going to make it very clear that you're under my protection, that anyone who touches you answers to me." His grip tightened. "But I need to know you can handle what that means. The attention, the danger, the reality of being connected to me." Maya thought of her grandmother, safe and cared for. Thought of the weeks she'd spent in this apartment, learning the man behind the reputation. Thought of the way her heart raced every time he entered a room. "I'm already connected to you," she said simply. "The question is whether you're ready to let someone in. Really in." Kangdae studied her for a long moment, then pulled out his phone. He made a call in rapid Korean, his tone commanding. When he hung up, he looked at Maya with an intensity that made her shiver. "I just called a meeting with the heads of every organization in Chicago. Tomorrow I'm going to make it known that you're mine. That means you'll be a target, Maya, but it also means you'll be untouchable." He paused. "There's no going back from this." "Then let's not go back." He kissed her again, and this time there was promise in it. A future neither of them had dared to imagine. When he pulled back, his expression was fierce. "You saved my life tonight. You saved mine weeks ago, in that alley. Then we're even." A slight smile curved his lips, the first genuine one she'd seen. Or maybe we're just getting started. That night, Maya lay awake in her room, her lips still tingling from his kisses, her heart full of equal parts hope and fear. She'd crossed a line tonight, stepped fully into Kangde's world, and she had no intention of ever stepping back out. The meeting was held in a private room at one of Kangde's establishments, a restaurant that served as a front for much more interesting business. Maya wore the sapphire dress again, Kangde's mother's necklace at her throat. A statement. "You don't have to come," Kangde had said that morning, giving her one last out. "Yes, I do." Now, standing beside him as he faced down the most dangerous men in Chicago, Maya understood the true weight of his world. These weren't businessmen in the traditional sense. These were wolves, and they could smell weakness. Kangde's hand rested possessively on the small of her back as he addressed the room in English, a courtesy, Maya realized, so she could understand every word. "Gentlemen, I've called you here to make one thing abundantly clear." His voice carried absolute authority. "The woman standing beside me is under my protection. Her name is Maya Carter, and she is mine. Anyone who threatens her, insults her, or even looks at her wrong answers directly to me." One of the men, someone Maya didn't recognize, spoke up. "With all respect, Han, making your personal attachments known makes you vulnerable." "On the contrary," Kangde's smile was dangerous. "It makes me motivated. Touch her, and I will burn your organization to the ground. Threaten her, and I will end you and everyone you love. This isn't weakness, Kim, this is me drawing a line." The tension in the room was palpable. Maya felt all eyes on her, assessing, calculating. Then, surprisingly, an older Korean man at the far end of the table nodded. "A man who has something worth protecting fights harder," he said in heavily accented English. "I respect this, Han. Your woman is safe from the Lee organization." One by one, the others voiced their agreement, all except Park, whose jaw was still bruised from last night. "And what happens when she becomes a liability?" Park challenged. "When your enemies use her against you?" Kangde's expression turned deadly cold. "Then I remind them why they fear me in the first place." He looked directly at Park. "You tried last night. You failed. Don't make me demonstrate what happens to those who fail twice." Park paled. The message was clear. He'd been allowed to live as a warning to others. That mercy wouldn't extend to a second attempt. "Now," Kangde continued, his tone lighter but no less commanding, "we have other business to discuss. Maya, you can wait in my office if you prefer." But Maya shook her head. "I'm staying." Surprise flickered across several faces. Kangde's hand squeezed her back once. Pride or approval, she thought. "Then stay," he said softly. "Only for her. But if anything makes you uncomfortable, you leave." "Understood." She nodded, and for the next hour she stood beside him as he conducted business. Some of it she understood, some went over her head. But what she comprehended clearly was the respect he commanded, the careful balance of power and diplomacy he wielded like a weapon. This was his world, and he was offering to let her into it. After the meeting, as they rode back to the penthouse, Kangde was quiet. Finally, he spoke. "You impressed them today. That takes courage." "I was terrified." "That's what courage is, being terrified and doing it anyway." He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Maya, I need to know you understand what you're getting into. This life, it's not easy. There will be danger, secrecy, and difficult choices. I understand. Do you?" He turned to face her, his expression serious. "Because once you're truly in my world, there's no halfway. You become a target, an asset, a weakness others will try to exploit. You're trying to scare me away. I'm trying to protect you." Maya cupped his face, making him look at her. "Then protect me by being honest, by letting me choose, by trusting that I know what I want." "And what do you want?" "You," she said simply. "All of you. The mafia boss and the man who checks on my grandmother. The dangerous criminal and the person who leaves me notes on my pillow. I don't want half of you, Kangde. I want everything." Something in his expression cracked open. "You deserve better than this. Better than me. That's not your choice to make." He pulled her into his lap, cradling her face in his hands. "Maya Carter, you walked into my life with a prayer and turned everything upside down. You make me want to be better, to build something beyond just power and territory. Then build it with me. It won't be easy. Nothing worth having ever is. He kissed her then, deep and claiming, and Maya felt the last walls between them crumble. When they broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. "Marry me," he said suddenly. Maya's heart stopped. "What? Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. Marry me and let me spend the rest of my life being worthy of you." His thumb brushed her cheek. "Let me give you everything you deserve. Let me be the answer to that prayer you made in the alley. Kangdae, I know it's fast. I know it's insane. But from the moment I heard you pray, something in me recognized something in you. Like I'd been waiting for you without knowing it." His eyes were vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "Say yes, Maya. Take a chance on me." She thought of where she'd been just months ago, desperate, exhausted, barely surviving. Thought of where she was now, safe, cared for, falling in love with a man who saw her worth when she'd almost forgotten it herself. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." His smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. He kissed her again, and this time there was joy in it and promise and relief. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. My answered prayer. "I love you too," she replied. My unexpected blessing. That evening, Kangdae insisted on taking her to visit her grandmother. The old woman took one look at them together, at their intertwined hands and the matching joy on their faces, and smiled knowingly. "So he's the one," she said to Maya. "Yes, Grandma, he's the one." Her grandmother looked at Kangdae with the assessing gaze of a woman who'd lived long enough to see through pretense. "You love my granddaughter?" "With everything I am," Kangdae replied without hesitation. "And you'll protect her, even from yourself when necessary, especially from myself." The old woman nodded, satisfied. "Then you have my blessing. But hurt her, and not all your power will save you from a grandmother's curse." Kangdae's smile was genuine. "I wouldn't expect anything less." As they left the facility, Maya felt lighter than she had in years. The future was uncertain, yes, dangerous, absolutely, but it was hers to choose, and she chose this, chose him, chose them. "What are you thinking?" Kangdae asked as they walked to the car. "That a few months ago I was praying in an alley in the rain, and now I'm engaged to a mafia boss who heard that prayer." She laughed. "My life is insane." "Our life," he corrected, pulling her close. "And it's just beginning." He kissed her there on the sidewalk, not caring who saw, and Maya kissed him back with all the hope and love in her heart. She'd prayed for help, for a miracle, for a chance. God had sent her Han Kangdae, dangerous, powerful, and utterly devoted. He'd taken her home and granted her everything she'd prayed for and more, so much more. "Nobody touches what's mine," he murmured against her lips, echoing the promise he'd made to the most dangerous men in Chicago. But now it sounded less like a threat, and more like a vow. "And you're mine, Maya Carter. Forever, forever," she agreed, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Their story had started with a prayer and a desperate moment in an alley. But this was just the beginning of their forever. Years had passed since that rainy November night when Maya had whispered her prayer to the uncaring sky. The penthouse had transformed over time, filling with evidence of their shared life. Photographs on the mantel, Maya's books on the shelves, cultural touches that blended Korean heritage with African diaspora traditions. Maya stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the Chicago skyline glow in the twilight. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, 7 months pregnant with their first child. Behind her she heard Kangdae's footsteps, then felt his arms wrap around her, his hands covering hers on their baby. "How are you feeling?" he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Like I'm carrying a future football player." She leaned back against his chest, marveling at how natural this felt, how far they'd come from that first tense meeting in the diner. Kangdae had kept every promise. Her grandmother had lived another 3 beautiful years, long enough to attend their wedding, long enough to know she'd be a great-grandmother. The day she'd passed peacefully in her sleep, Kangdae had held Maya through her grief, had honored the woman who'd raised his wife with a memorial that brought together communities that rarely intersected. He'd also begun the slow, careful process of transitioning his business interests toward legitimacy. It was a dangerous path. You didn't just leave the mafia, but Kangdae was nothing if not strategic. He wanted his child to inherit a legacy of strength without the constant shadow of violence. "I was thinking," Maya said, watching their reflection in the window, "about that night when I prayed in the alley. You still believe it was God who sent me?" She turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd changed her life. There was grey at his temples now. laugh lines around his eyes. Still dangerous, still powerful, but also hers. I believe God answers prayers in unexpected ways. I asked for help, for strength, for a chance. She touched his face, feeling him lean into her palm. And he sent me you, my unexpected blessing. I heard your prayer and took you home, Kang Dae said, echoing the title that had defined their beginning. Best decision I ever made, even with all the complications. Especially with all the complications. He kissed her softly. You made me human again, Maya. You gave me a reason to be better than what I was raised to be. Their daughter kicked strongly, making them both laugh. Kang Dae knelt, pressing his lips to Maya's belly, speaking to their child in Korean, promises and hopes and love. Maya ran her fingers through his hair, thinking about the journey that had brought them here, the dangers they'd faced, the enemies they'd overcome, the love they'd built in the midst of chaos. She thought about the girl she'd been in that alley, so broken and desperate. That girl would never have believed this could be her life. Thank you, she whispered. Kang Dae stood, pulling her close. For what? For hearing my prayer, for seeing me when I felt invisible, for choosing me when you could have chosen anyone. Maya, his voice was rough with emotion. You were never invisible. You shone like a beacon in my dark world, and choosing you wasn't a choice, it was inevitability. Like gravity, like breathing. He kissed her then, tender and deep, and Maya felt the same electric thrill she'd felt that first time. Some things never changed. The way he looked at her like she was precious, the way he protected her, the way he loved her with an intensity that still took her breath away. When they broke apart, Kang Dae rested his hand on her belly again, his eyes soft with wonder. Our daughter is going to have both worlds, your strength and grace, my protection and resources. She'll be unstoppable. She'll be loved, Maya corrected. That's what matters most. She'll be both. As night fell over Chicago, they stood together at the windows, watching their city light up against the darkness. Two people from impossibly different worlds, brought together by a prayer and an answer that neither had expected. Maya had prayed for help, and God had sent her a mafia boss with a wounded heart and unexpected capacity for love. Kang Dae had been searching for something real, and fate had delivered him a woman whose faith and strength reminded him what humanity felt like. Their love story wasn't traditional. It wasn't safe or simple or easy to explain, but it was theirs, built on honesty and trust and the stubborn refusal to let their differences define them. I love you, Maya said, not for the first time and not for the last. I love you, Kang Dae replied, the words carrying the weight of everything they'd overcome. My answered prayer, my home, my everything. And in that moment, wrapped in each other's arms with their daughter growing between them and their future stretching out bright and uncertain, Maya knew that some prayers were answered in the most unexpected, most perfect ways possible. She'd asked for help. God had given her love, and that made all the difference.